Protests have erupted in at least 10 different states. People are coming out and demanding an end to this lockdown. They are demanding the economy be reopened. We are seeing the data from numerous studies showing that the mortality rate is much, much lower. Our projections were off. Now, it's still important to take social distancing seriously because we are seeing major hotspots in some areas. But of course, now we're at a point where people are saying enough is enough. Here's the thing. I don't think the protests, for the most part, matter. I mean that seriously. I'm not trying to disrespect the protesters, not at all. If you want to go out and protest for your freedoms, fight for your rights, 100%, I'm totally down. Be it an environmental activist blocking a street, you get arrested for it. But hey, I'm down for that. Or someone saying the quarantines are unconstitutional and coming out demanding their rights, or demanding the government stop infringing their rights. I'm all about it, right? Well, these protests are great. I mean, you fight for what you want. The reality is, the quarantines, the lockdowns failing just because people don't care anymore. It's not the protesters that are putting pressure on the local governments. It's just people are starting to ignore the lockdowns. So you have certain areas where they've reopened beaches, right? Immediately people flooded the beaches in California and in Florida. And in response in California, the governor's like, oh, we better lock things down again. And then protesters came out. In Los Angeles, traffic jams are back. People are just driving again. And we got a bunch of other stories. So you're probably familiar with all of these protests. I've covered them in the past couple of days. But check this out. Now, this dude definitely crossed the line. Shocking moment. Man, 25, pushes Texas Ranger into a lake after he told a group of people illegally drinking and smoking at a park to social distance. All right, that's taking things a little bit too far. I'm not going to try and pretend that this guy was like, I refuse to quarantine and shoved him. It's just some young dude being stupid and shoving the Ranger. But it adds, a grain of sand to the heap of people just ignoring the lockdown orders, saying, you can't tell us what to do. One of the funny things about this is that we heard from the New York Times and MSNBC journalists, they've warned fascism could come to the U.S. if the coronavirus shutdowns wreck the economy. I have never been more confident that we will not have fascism in this country. Now, look, I know we got really close. We've got, major corporations censoring people. It is bad. But you know what, man? When they put too much pressure on the people, the dam breaks and people just stop caring. So for sure, I think we should be concerned about a rise of authoritarianism and fascism. But in the end, people are snapping. They just don't care. So let me do this. Let me read you this story from Chicago first. We'll go back to the protests. Mayor Lightfoot threatens citations and jail time after police break up house parties across Chicago. That word is plural. People in Chicago don't care. Let me get this straight, or let me simplify. The governments of various areas are saying you must stay at home, and people are just not even thinking about it. They don't care. They're carrying on life as usual. According to this story from Mother Jones, Americans are tiring of COVID-19 lockdowns. I'm sorry, government, you have lost. Now, I'm not advocating for people to go and break these, rules. No, by no means. We should take them very, very seriously. But the point I'm trying to make is, en masse, people just don't care. It's not a protest. It's not in defiance, not anger. It's people just not caring. They said stay home. People said okay. And then after a couple of weeks, people were like, meh, I'm bored. I'm leaving. There's nothing you can do about it. So let's go back to these protests, see what's going on. The Hill reports demonstrators in at least 10 states across the country gathered on Friday to protest against stay-at-home orders and other emergency measures meant to blunt the coronavirus spread. The protests underscored how antsy some are getting to return to a sense of normalcy after the coronavirus, which has infected nearly 1.1 million people, shuttered businesses across an array of industries, and pushed more than 30 million Americans into unemployment. Though some demonstrators were lightly attended, demonstrations occurred in state capitals and cities in California, Colorado, Delaware, Florida, Illinois, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Tennessee, and Washington. Here's what I want you to consider. Take a look at California, Colorado, Delaware, Illinois, New Jersey, New Mexico. These are blue states. New York. We're not seeing this in red states. You know why? Because the Republicans in many red states never implemented these orders. Now, here's the question I brought up yesterday. In South Dakota, the governor did not institute stay-at-home orders. No big outbreak, no escalating hotspots. Perhaps the stay-at-home orders were a mistake. Perhaps what we need is social distancing, but people should be outside. You know why? Sunlight is the best disinfectant. I mean, quite literally, sunlight, as my understanding, kills the virus. You can still get it outside, so be careful. And I think we have to do our best. Look, I'm not trying to, I think definitely some of these, like Governor Whitmer, for instance, has taken it too far. Some of these politicians have pushed too hard. I don't think it's a nefarious plot to like lock people in their homes or anything. I just think they didn't know. And now that we have the data coming in, we've got to follow the science. So what many people have said, many experts, is that if we maintain social distancing but spend more time outdoors, that actually reduces the infection rate because you're less likely to be in proximity to other people. Indoors, it's small and cramped. The Hill says, what does this one say? So much of the coverage of these reopen events makes them look big. Here's the reopen New York protest today. It is very tiny, mind you. Several protesters told local media that shutdown orders were imposing too great an economic burden. Okay, so this is what we know all this stuff, right? You know about the protests. They're not very big. And that's why I was saying I don't think the protests matter all that much. I think what matters is this. Americans are tiring of COVID-19 lockdowns. A couple of weeks ago, this is from Mother Jones. A couple of weeks ago, I put up a chart based on data from Apple showing how often people asked their iPhones for driving directions. If you assume that this is a rough proxy for the amount of driving people are doing, it shows us how seriously people are taking the lockdown orders. Here's what it looks like in about 30 American cities. It actually shows that in Cleveland, nobody cares. Like people in Cleveland. So around March 12th, driving directions on iPhones dropped dramatically. And then on April 3rd, slowly started coming back up, Cleveland spiking the most. Yeah, it's because, look, protests or not, the government just doesn't have the ability to lock us down. Now you can threaten people. You can come up to people and yell at them. And what's going to happen? This dude's going to push you in a lake. That's what's happening. Everyone's getting particularly anti-fascist. As you can see, driving plunged considerably starting around March 12th, which makes sense. It hit bottom toward the end of the month and stayed there for a few days. But during the first week of April, it started to creep up again. It's gone up about 40% since then. The reason I checked on this is because I got some takeout for lunch on Friday. I noticed the streets and parking lots seemed fairly busy. Not pre-coronavirus busy, but certainly busier than a couple of weeks ago. And so they are. Here's another piece of evidence. SafeGraph Shelter-in-Place Index. The chart shows the change in the number of people who are staying at home for each county. There's a baseline number, and the bars show how much that's changed. Overall, it peaked around April 12th, when nearly 20% more people were staying home than usual. But ever since then, it's been dropping. Now, many of you may know I recently drove across the entire country in a van and back in like 11 days. Took 4 days there, 4 days back. I was working on the way there, and I was stopping to do the Joe Rogan podcast. I drove for a few reasons, minimizing contact, right? The van is fully self-sustaining. It's got solar power. It runs on its own juice. It's got a shower. It's got a bathroom in it. And so it was, I don't want to fly because of the risk to myself and others. You know, we've got to take it seriously, I guess. And so I was like, you know what? We'll drive. It's safer. It's more reliable. And the only contact we make really is when we pump gas, because for the most part, we didn't stop anywhere. But here's what we noticed. On the way there were very strict rules in many of the gas stations saying you have to wear masks or you can't come in. To me, that was interesting. On the way back, much of these rules were gone. We took the exact same route. Now, there's one difference. One of the towns we drove past was completely locked down to all visitors. I believe that was Laguna, New Mexico. And then recently, Gallup, New Mexico also locked down. But we drove from Philadelphia to Los Angeles. And on the way there, every place we'd stop, it would be like, you can't come in without a mask. You can't come without a mask. Maintain social distancing. On the way back, just a week later, people weren't wearing masks anymore. The signs on the doors were taken down. Nobody was paying attention to social distancing. Nobody cared. And that was interesting. I tweeted about it. And I'm like, it seems like in just a week's time, it's not that it's like all of a sudden overnight, people stopped caring. It's just gradually people are caring less and less. I think the reason is you can't prove it to them. There's nothing you're going to say that's going to make them feel like they're being threatened because there's nothing happening around them. You can go on TV, you can go on the news, you can scream, you can ban YouTubers, but in the end, people are going to do what they think makes the most sense. Unless you and you can't pass laws blocking people from going outside, so it's just not going to work. Let's read a little bit more of this story because, here's the hard data. Check this out. He says, I feel like I'm hardly one to talk since lockdown orders barely affect me at all. Still, these two charts suggest that Americans were able to comply with lockdowns for only about a month before they started to take them less and less seriously. Europeans mostly seem to have done better, even though their lockdowns were more severe. And our willingness to sacrifice for only a month speaks poorly for both our political system and our innate stores of self-discipline. Now, a mere few weeks after weariness started to set in, we have this. Armed protesters demonstrate against COVID-19 lockdown at Michigan Capitol. I will argue the inverse. It doesn't show that we have poor self-discipline. It shows that we are a freedom-loving people. Think about how look, go back in time to the European colonial era. And you had people who were living in these big cities in Europe and didn't mind abiding by the rules and the laws. You then had pioneers and people willing to risk their lives trying to travel, 3,000 miles across the ocean, many of whom died, to come to wilderness because they wanted freedom. They wanted to practice their own religion. They wanted opportunities. They wanted to stake out on their own. Now think about how that culture develops. In Europe, you have a bunch of people who say, I'll just do what I'm supposed to do. And the people who say, you can't tell me what to do. I'm going to go find my own way. Developed a new country, the United States. So our roots, whether we realize it or not, grew. The country grew from this mentality of I'm going to do what I want to do. Hence the Constitution, the guarantees, our life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. And Europe is very different. So it's no surprise to me when you think about that Europe is much more socialized and the U.S. is much more individual or individualized, whatever. We're not so much. I mean, we're a community. We have rules, we have laws, we have social customs and all that stuff. But we're much more about our individual liberties. We respect the individual much more than, or we're more focused on the individual. So I wouldn't consider that a bad thing. I just say it's different. There are benefits to being heavily communal, like people will just lock down and do what the government says. That can help you in times of an emergency. It also makes you susceptible to a failed state because communism, authoritarianism, fascism, these things do not work. They work in the short period until people snap and start ignoring you. Now think about what happens when you have a freedom-loving country. People just go out and do their thing and no one can do anything about it. Sure, you can threaten people, you can ticket people. Well, some dude's going to push you in a lake. In these other countries where they enforce these harsh lockdowns, people are scared to go out. And then finally they snap and you get a revolution. So I think this is actually a safeguard for us in a sense. It prevents a total collapse of our system, realizing that the government isn't that powerful. Here's what he goes on to write. These are among the folks that Donald Trump called good people. And I don't understand. What's the point he's trying to make about people protesting? Who just needed to have a little something done for them. The truth is, of course, is that these are well-organized GOP protesters responding to Trump's own order to liberate blue states from Democratic governors. Even the simplest and most obvious responses to the pandemic have been turned into partisan battles. Let me stop you right there, buddy, and ask you a question. You're seeing smallish protests. Now, in Huntington Beach, it was thousands of people. And you're arguing these are, Trump's call to whatever. Oh, I'm sorry. Is everyone who's ignoring the order, which you recognized, Mr. Mother Jones, you are pointing out people are ignoring this. Is that because of Trump? No, come on, calm down. The people who are coming out and are angry and the people who are protesting are doing it because they legitimately do not like these harsh orders. It's plain to see. Here's what he writes. Even in the simplest and most obvious response to the pandemic have been turned into partisan battles. For progressives, masks have become a sign that you take the pandemic seriously and are willing to make a personal sacrifice to save lives. Prominent people who don't wear them are shamed and dragged on Twitter by lefty accounts. On the right, where the mask is often seen as the symbol of a purported overreaction to the coronavirus, mask promotion is a target of ridicule, a sign that is deeply polarized in America. A sign that in a deeply polarized America, almost anything can be politicized and turned into a token of tribal affiliation. Now, that's a bit extreme. I have seen some stupid hot takes from conservatives, from right-wingers on Twitter saying things like, I'm never going to wear a mask or something like that. It's like, dude, you can wear a mask even not in quarantine. You know what I mean? Like, get sniffles or something. You can wear a mask. Why is everybody taking this so seriously? It's weird. But I'll tell you what, most people do not see it that way. Look, there are tribalists who are arguing, but even hardcore Trump supporters aren't like, okay, there are a few profiles I've seen of hardcore Trump supporters being like, masks are dumb. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to get a vaccine. Most people aren't saying this. Most people on the right are saying rational things like, we must consider the economy. People are going to starve. Like, I've even seen like full Trump, like hardcore Trump supporters talking about the effects of a damaged economy, starvation, and getting things going again. They're not ragging on people for wearing masks, and they're encouraging. I've seen many conservatives encourage social distancing at these protests. On the left, they're not wearing masks saying, I wear a mask. It's not that extreme. You're pointing to the weirdos for the most part. Most people on the left are like, you know, we better lock down and we need UBI and other things. I personally disagree with that. That doesn't make sense. They don't understand how the economy works. And you have people on the right saying we need to start producing products again and get back to work. That's the real argument. Stop looking at the caricature of people. Sure, a bunch of protesters showed up in Michigan, but is that representative of literally everyone who's defying the quarantine orders? No, it's people having house parties in Chicago, dude. They're having house parties, man. These aren't Trump supporters throwing house parties. It's Chicago. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. Chicago is MAGA country, right? So I guess it must be Trump encouraging people to go out and party and defy the local governments. This dude's getting crazy. Look what he says. This is disgraceful beyond imagining. Conservatives have turned the act of taking a pandemic seriously into a partisan skirmish in the culture wars. I'm sorry, dude. That's you taking caricatures of the left and the right and pitting them against each other. Not regular people, and certainly not conservatives, whatever you mean by that. A pandemic. And because of this, people are driving more. They're leaving their houses more, and they're refusing to wear masks. How can this be happening? Are you kidding me? This dude's actually arguing that conservatives are the reason that people are defying the lockdown orders. That's right. Everyone's favorite MAGA country, Chicago, has seen an eruption of house parties because Donald Trump said, liberate Michigan. And all of the Trump-loving Chicagoans were like, here, here, Trump, we're going to go party. That is insane. That is not what's happening. This dude who pushed the guy into the lake, look at these all smiling ahead. He got arrested. He is not... I mean, maybe he's a Trump supporter. I don't know. These look like people who actually just don't care about politics all that much. You know what the problem is, Mother Jones? It's you. You're the one turning this into a culture war battle. For sure, there are weird culture war people on social media saying weird culture war things and making fun of people from the South. This is the weirdest thing, all right? I see a lot of these posts from lefties that seem to think that conservatives are all from the Deep South. I guess it's an old caricature of conservatives being rednecks or something. There was that one where she was like, your nana and peepaw are going to get sick. And it's like, where do you think these people live? You know, like most of Oregon is conservative. I'm pretty sure people who live in Oregon don't have Southern twangs and talk about nana and peepaw. So you're talking about a few states. And the funny thing is the Deep South is actually one of the densest populations, one of the densest minority population centers in the country. So who are you talking about? These people like watched a cartoon to get their facts and then think like John Oliver is reality. Let me tell you something, Mother Jones, man. Conservatives did not convince people to go have a party at the lake or to go surfing or to have house parties or to drive to the gas station to pick up a bag of nachos. That's just because people are not caring anymore. Here's what's really fascinating. How he starts the article and how he ends it. Americans are tiring of COVID-19 lockdowns. I agree, Mr. Drum. That's the writer, Mr. Drum. I agree. People are tiring of it. And so they're just going out and doing their things. But to end the article by arguing because of conservatives, they are, what he says, because of this, people are driving more. No, you know what, man? I'll tell you what. I'll tell you where this ends up. Bill Barr signals DOJ support for lockdown protesters. There's not a whole lot of them. It's in the thousands. You know, look, again, no disrespect, more power to you. Go do your thing. But let me tell you. The federal government agrees. You have a constitutional right to protest. Bill Barr is saying the Constitution is not suspended. You can't just start locking things down. Sorry, it don't work that way. When police in Raleigh said protesting was not an essential function or whatever, I have never wanted to protest more in my life. Of course I didn't, because of people don't. If I wasn't willing to protest when the police said this, you think all of these people going out and driving are doing so for tribal culture war reasons? You know what, man? Here's the good news. What we're seeing is that even with the harshest of threats, jail time and fines, the American people just do not think you can stop them, or they're willing to shove you into the lake. They're going to do what they want to do. Man, America's pretty great, isn't it? Look, I think we have to abide by the social distancing rules. I think we should do our best to isolate at home for the time being. The data is coming out suggesting we can start lightening lightening things up and relaxing these quarantines. And that's been happening. I'm not an outlier in this position. They've been slowly releasing these things. Many states have already, have never even locked them down in the first place. But we're getting there. We're getting there. So look, do not shove people into a lake. Don't have house parties. But it doesn't matter what I think or say. Okay, I can tell you I think it's chill, do your best. The real issue isn't about house parties or partying at the lake. It's about getting the country back working again, because we don't want people to lose their lives. This is a UN warning that people will starve. So we need to take that seriously and get back to work and start opening things up again. It doesn't mean we should go out and just be defiant and be like, I'm going to party, because that's not really helping either. But it doesn't matter what I think. The point is, people can do it anyway. The government can't stop them. We're not China, I guess, but I'll leave it there. Stick around. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel, and I will see you all then.